Start the video, please.
Special meeting of Planning Commission for August 17th is called to order. Scott, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Please stand. And over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Some members of the public here, so anybody want to speak on things that are not on the agenda?
We'll first do a roll call. David Brent. Scott Gold.
I'm here.
Aaron Peterson, absent. Justin Rodriguez.
Present.
Jack Williams.
Here.
And just for the record, Aaron Peterson wanted to recuse himself because of the proximity to this project. And then we also have our city attorney on Zoom with us.
So now to public comment. Are there anybody who wants to speak on anything that's not on the agenda?
If anybody wants to speak on something not on the agenda on Zoom or phone, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. Seeing none.
Seeing none. Any requests for continuance?
There's one hand. Okay, go ahead.
You got one?
Please unmute yourself and state your name and residence.
Zinnia, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I also submitted some documents, emailed just now to your email. So is this open discussion right now, or is this with regards to the agenda item?
Open.
This is for items not on the agenda.
Okay, then I'll pass for now, please.
Any continuance, withdrawals, or addition of next agenda items?
No, sir.
No, seeing none. Conflicts or ex parte communications? We've got Aaron with a conflict. No communications. So moving on to the item 3A.
Good evening. Lori Tamura, Planning Department, making a presentation in regards to the preliminary review of the Mission Drive apartment project. This is located in the property that's formerly known as the Solvang Lumberyard. And this property is surrounded by many uses that you're familiar with. The San Ynez Mission to the south, the Vets Hall Senior Center, county offices to the west. There's existing homes and apartments that are some TRC zone as well as 7R1. And then to the north, you have a couple of projects in the DR20 designation. This site is zoned DR20 with base build out of 44 units based on the acreage. We did receive an application on July 28th, and it needed some additional submittal requirements, so officially the application was filed on August 6th, and it's for a multi-unit project. It includes there's 6 buildings, 3 of them are 4 stories, 2 of them have 18 two-bedroom units, the other one has a 20 two-bedroom units. One of the buildings is 8,000 square foot storage, and then there is a 3-story, 2-bedroom duplex unit. And then the old house, it will be remaining, and it will become a residential unit also. The parking requirements for the site are 228 units or spaces if you go just by the zoning ordinance. They are, by state law, it'd be 218 or 118. They're providing 59, so they're asking for a parking reduction down to a half space per bedroom and no guest parking. The architectural design will need to be reviewed by the Branding and Design Committee when the application formally is completed and submitted in its final form. We did go through a little bit of a timeline on this project, only because so many things happened over the course of the last couple of weeks. There was a submittal or a concept plan for a hotel project that, and condominium units. And then on the 16th of July, that was, said, wait a minute, we're going to go with a housing project. Then on the 20th, we did see a exhibit for 60 units. And then on the 28th is when we did receive the plans for a 59-unit project. And after our first review of that, we held off that acceptance and gave some additional instructions, and then the rest of the items were filed on August 6th. So August 6th is considered the submittal date for this application. The project is coming to the city of Solvang under two different state laws. One of them is bonus density law, and the other one is SB 330. Under bonus density, if an application provides at least 10% of its base zoning in very low category, they can ask for and receive 35% bonus density. So in this case, the base zoning is 44 units. They are committing 5 of those units to the very low income category. And by right, they can apply for the 35% or 15 additional units.
When you
So-
say they, you're talking about the developer?
The developer, yes. So the application is for 59 units, with 5 of those units being in the very low category.
Hey, Lauren, can I ask, what does the very low income look like in the San Ynez Valley or in Solvang? What are we talking about?
The table that you can use for determining income levels is by the county rate. The medium dense income is about 80,000 right now, and the very low category is at 35,000 per year income.
Total household?
Yes.
No.
So the other, so along with those incentives of 35 units, or of 35%, you can also ask for concessions. In this case, the concession is for height. They're asking to go from 35 to 49 feet. And they're also asking for the parking reduction that I described earlier. So those are the two concessions. They do meet all of the other requirements of the city's DR zoning ordinance. Under SB 330, this is the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. It sets out a series of steps that the city would go through in order to process this application. There's time limits, there are, certain communication with the applicant, and there's also the requirement that there not be more than 5 hearings on the project. So we have accepted this application under those provisions, and we're moving forward with the process.
What
Is
hearing
this
number?
the first of those 5?
This one,
This is the first one?
Yes.
They don't start when the full application comes in?
No. This counts.
That was my question.
So today, we're here as a briefing presentation. The applicant is here. We wanted to have the opportunity for the community to see this project, and we have up until September 6th to respond to the first 30-day review and move forward with that process.
And we have the applicant here who would like to make a presentation, I believe.
Okay.
Or-
Before he starts, can I ask a couple quick questions? With the bonus density, has that been granted already, the 35%? Is that still a request, or has that been granted?
By law, because he offered the very low, we are required to
So
give
by
it to him.
definition, it must be granted?
Yes.
Okay. And then the 2 concessions, the height and the parking, have they been granted?
we are working with them on those two.
Okay, so by definition, because of the bonus density rule or code, these haven't necessarily been approved yet.
We have some concerns about those, so those will be responded to in our letter in 30 days or in a couple of weeks. You know, we can grant height, obviously, but, you know, we want to talk with them about particularly the building along Mission Drive. Is there a way that we can
Right.
work with that height? You know, maybe the other ones can be at that height, but maybe the first one would be, you know, we can talk about how that is designed.
Okay, so I'll ask in a different way. The 35% density comes with this code.
Yes.
The other two, the height and the parking, are discretionary.
Well, what the state law requires is you can get 2 concessions. These are the 2 he's asked for.
Okay,
We are going to work with him on those 2 concessions.
thank you.
If I may add, though, under the state housing law, Lori is making it, I think, a little bit sound like this is fully discretionary. And in fact, the burden shifts to the city to establish under written findings based upon substantial evidence that there is a specific adverse impact on public health or safety before we could deny either of the 2 concessions or any waiver necessary to allow for the development of 59 units. And I just want to note, please don't shoot the messenger. I've been, I think, shot enough over the versions of the project that were, I think, more consistent with the concepts of a hotel on the site. This is coming back as a different concept. I'm sure that the applicant will explain his thinking on that.
Okay, I have a question about SB 330. I've tried reading it several times. I keep falling asleep towards the end. But there are a number of things in there that appear to automatically invalidate some of our codes in general plan. And do we have any listing of what those things are and how they change? Or is it up to each individual person to read SB 330 and then all of the general plan and our codes to see what they are? Has anybody in the city looked at that and
Well,
put together a list of what we can consider and what we can't?
so SB 330 went into effect January 1st. This is the first project that's come forward under these provisions in the city. As we started looking at this a week and a half ago, we went on the website and just Googled what every other jurisdiction's doing, what the state law says, what housing and development at the state is saying, and we'll have a better understanding of how we can implement this with this project going forward as we continue that research. But I can't say today we've gone through all of our codes to see which one of the state law is implementing or not implementing.
Okay, so I assume that's going to happen in the next 30 days before we respond to this.
Correct.
I'd like to be on the list of getting a copy of whatever that
Okay.
is, if I could, please. Okay, so shall we move on? Mr. St. George, you,
I'm glad I'm the only one that wasn't not, or was confused on reading SB 330. So, it's really confusing. That's why I have other people handling this for me at this point. This is my 4th SB 330 project. We've submitted the other 3 in the city of Santa Barbara.
I'm not able to hear him on Zoom.
Is the mic on?
Can you increase the volume?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Go ahead and try.
Is that good?
That's better.
Okay, great. Well, this project, as you know, is the third iteration, maybe the fourth iteration of what I'd like to put on that property. Where we are at this point right now is that it didn't seem that we were getting a lot of traction for the hotel from the community at large. There was a great disappointment to myself, but I have payments I need to make on this property. I can't just have it sit there, and I'm sure the city would probably like to see something happen with that anyway. I know
His
that,
voice is fading again.
Just talk louder.
talk loud, me talk louder?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't get asked to do that very often. Okay, so this project is, initially why I purchased the property was to put housing here. I know there's a great need for housing in the San Ynez Valley, mainly because of the casino that's down the street. My feeling is that this would probably eliminate some traffic from the busing. I would imagine probably a good 50 to 75% of the tenants here, based on my experience and my knowledge, will be working at the casino. So I think there may be a positive traffic outcome of this project. The project, the stats are, we've actually, we're supplying 62 spaces instead of the required 59. Maybe that was the first one that Lori remembered was the 59. But we were able to squeeze in 62 parking spaces. So we do have 3 guest spaces. The height, we've reduced the height down to 47 feet. It's no longer 49. Trying to pull it down as much as we really can. They're all 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath. They're larger units. The idea is the larger the unit, the longer the stay. That's been my experience as a landlord. They're about 1,077 square feet each. But when you have a set of stairs in it, works out to about 1,000 square feet. So 1,000 square feet for a 2-bedroom apartment is pretty nice. One of the other amenities that we put in here, one of my experiences, which I have in these lower income type of, hello? Oh, is that, okay, now you can hear me. Okay, now I can stand up straight. There tends to be a storage problem where people are throwing things out on their decks, into the parking lots. And so what we've done, it's pretty unique on this project. We've actually built, there's a storage facility back up on Maple for the tenants. So each one of the tenants, they'll have their own little storage unit. So it won't be an issue. Hopefully it won't be an issue where these decks are getting cluttered up with bicycles, toys, whatever decks seem to get cluttered up with. But that's, when you look at the back, that'll appear to be a 1-story building from Maple. And because of the gradient difference, we'll be able to drive up from this project, but also drive up from the Maple side. There'll be a little turnout where people can come in and walk straight in. We've reduced the housing, the sheriff's housing down now to a total of 3 units. We'll be building a duplex back on Maple. It'll appear to be a 2-story. It will actually, in reality, be a 3-story. Once again, the gradient difference will allow us to put the 2-car garages underneath, kind of a tuck under, so it'll have a lower appearance for Maple Street. The house on 246 or Mission, that'll also be a sheriff housing house as well. Keep going. Okay. At this point, it's pretty much bare bones, because I'd like to get some input from the planning department. We've got quite a few trees on the property, which I think we could actually probably even get a few more on there. But I know sometimes trees aren't everybody's desire. There is a manager's unit on site, which is required by law, but they actually, if you look at it, there's an office off to the side. Once again, I really don't anticipate a lot of turnover on this project, just because of the amenities, the size of the units, the amount of bathrooms we're putting into them. A typical two-bedroom, one-bath, low income, or excuse me, a typical low income would be a two-bedroom, one-bath. These are two-bedroom, as I said, 2.5 baths. And the fact that they come with a little storage unit, I think we'll probably see some good longevity in the tenants, which I think is important for the project. And that's pretty much about it. Any questions? Okay.
Yes, we have one.
Hi. This was a really confusing agenda. It looks like there's two projects being proposed. There's a mixed use and the residential. It's hard to be a person in the community to look at this agenda when there's two projects proposed and understand exactly what it is that's being proposed on the lot. Right? There's two illustrations. One was for the hotel, that was a mixed use, and the other was for the residential unit. You can't tell, looking at your agenda, what it is that you're going to be talking about. The mixed use was added later. I think it was over this weekend. And I'm wondering if there was proper notification given, the 10-day legal notice for the residents near the lot. It's very confusing. Both projects are oversized in scope and scale, and I'm wondering why the developer was allowed to appear to propose two projects. I believe looking at
Maybe
the,
we could address.
could that be addressed? Because it's extremely confusing. How did that even happen?
Yeah, I had that question too. I saw the Mission Drive site plan. I was like, why is this
SB 330
hotel
doesn't.
elevation in there? I didn't understand what that was. I just thought it was
Right,
something like
SB
an
330
oversight.
doesn't allow for multiple projects to be proposed, and so that would mean that this meeting was what? Was it about one project, two projects?
So,
May I answer?
Yes.
Yes.
This meeting is noticed just fine for the housing project. There was interest, I believe, at your last meeting expressed about the other project. There had been a newspaper article that had mentioned that the applicant had come up with a project that was a mixed-use project only on what we've called the old lumberyard site. And so for your planning commission's review and interest, it seemed appropriate that you be able to see what that project would have been, but what you have in front of you now is just the housing project. I would note that this site was rezoned by the city council in 2015. It formerly was a TRC site. A TRC site could have a mixed use or hotel project. The current zoning that was placed on the site in 2015 is DR20. And so with the DR20, you actually can't have mixed use or a hotel. So in order to have anything else, it would require a rezone of the site. So again, the only thing that you have technically in front of you this evening is the proposal for the project, including affordable housing. And actually under SB 330, now that you've had an SB 330 application, the city would not even be allowed to initiate a rezone of the site to a lower density. So the only way that you could go back to even thinking about any other project is if that was something that the developer was instead asking for and wanted to work with the city on. At this point, I didn't hear the developer say anything about that in his presentation, so it sounds like we're essentially, we've got the affordable housing project that has been appropriately noticed.
Okay. So the affordable housing project has the original skit house remaining, and that, I believe, is because it's understood to be a historic building. There should be, I believe, a CEQA or an architectural historical report available, and I believe that should have been a part of the agenda, so that this council could see what the historical ramifications are of the site. The site is also directly across from the mission. It's known to be an area where the Chumash had actually kept cattle, and it's presumed to have been the slaughter yard for the mission. This is a historically sensitive site, and that should be reviewed. I don't believe that SB 330 allows anyone to negate the history of the site. I agree with you, it's extremely confusing, but there is a portion in there that allows for historical review. So at this time, I just think it's stunning that we're going to even be talking about this project. There's no planning department. Who is going to oversee a huge project like this? This city has been administratively gutted. There's no planning department. There is no BDC. Why are we starting this process now when there's no one to really handle it? It seems odd that the application was even allowed to be made. Thank you.
Anybody else online or in the audience want to speak?
Is it Trent,
We had a gentleman earlier.
Trent Kasberg raising your hand?
Yes.
Trent, go ahead.
Hi. May I share my screen, please? It might be easier in
You should be able to.
versus me speaking. I don't know if I can. I know that I sent the documents to Zinnia, but I don't know that she's able to print them out. So I'm going to share my screen. With regards to meeting notification, I'm a resident. My name is Trent Kasberg. I live on Pine Street in Solvang. I'm a resident and never received notice of the meeting. I don't know if you can see my screen now.
Yes.
I received it on Saturday or Friday at 5:05 p.m. through the website. I've just got questions about that. I don't know if you guys can screenshot or speak to this information. It's within the city code that notification be given, not just to those who have requested, but also those residents within 300 feet of the project.
So
Anybody have any
this
comments
is
or-
this is not a public hearing technically. It's just a Brown Act meeting, and it was appropriately
Okay.
noticed as a special
So, but
session.
if this is part of the 5 that are going to be a part of this 330 or SB 330, why weren't we notified? Is this going to include or be a part of that 5 meetings?
I believe the way SB 330 defines a meeting or public meeting is a Brown Act meeting, so this would apply as one of the 5.
Okay, but we weren't notified.
We are only required to notify public hearings. This is once again not a public hearing, it's a Brown Act open meeting.
Zena is correct,
It's-
and there are a number of things about the state housing law that don't fit in very well with local government agencies' typical reviews of projects. One I'll note, Lori mentioned that the BDC would be reviewing this project. We're probably going to have some discussion about that because SB 3.
We don't have one, right? We don't have a BDC.
Yeah, I'm sorry, may I finish? If you all looked at the stuff in the packet, SB 330 actually only allows the city to apply objective standards, and the definition of objective is actually very tight. So in many ways, and the Planning Commission, for those of you who haven't been at Planning Commission meetings, the Planning Commission has had a number of discussions about the ADU ordinance changes that the city had looked at and then found couldn't comply with the changes in state law for um, for ADUs, for additional dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units. And in many ways, SB 330 is a lot like the ADU law. It really very much limits the level of typical discretionary review that the city would have on a project. And again, puts fairly tight timelines. There was a speaker who asked, why did the city even allow an applicant to file an application? It's actually because the state law requires the city to accept what's called a pre-application, respond to the pre-application within 30 days. And then there are additional fairly tight timelines the city is going to have to meet under that section. And again, further limitations on what review we can have, what things the city can require. And so this is going to be a different review process than you've typically seen in the past for city projects. Again, due to the new state, they call it the Housing Crisis Act. Again, the city didn't pass that law, the state legislature passed the law, and the governor signed it.
Okay, let's move on with that. Anybody else have any comments?
I see that Nancy Emerson has her hand raised.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Nancy Emerson from We Watch. We recognize this project has some strings attached, and that's going to limit the city and how it moves through the planning process. But we're asking that you do as thorough a job as possible and involve citizens as much as possible. We support the inclusion of 5 of the 56 apartment building units for very low income households. It is not a totally affordable apartment project, but those 5 units are needed in our city. We have a lot of lower income employees in Solvang. A family of 4 would be limited to an income of $43,900 to be eligible for one of those projects. A full-time clerk or lodging housekeeper making $15 an hour would earn about $30,000 a year. What we're not prepared to accept is the mass of the apartment buildings facing Mission Drive, the architecture, which does not meet village area requirements, and I understand that this is in the village area, and the lack of adequate parking. We question whether the requested height should be allowed, if there's any flexibility in that. The 3 apartment buildings appear to be very close together, and there was no information yet about whether the front building at least meets the 42-foot setback requirement. It would help to consider placing the buildings perpendicular to Mission Drive and incorporating storage into each building rather than having an additional 8,000 square foot building on the property, given the fact that that space may be needed for adequate parking. It theoretically would give about 138 square feet per apartment of storage. That seems quite generous. It's not necessarily a terrible idea to provide extra storage, it's just how it's done. We're interested in the heights of the Veterans Building and Svensgaard Danish Motel. This has relevance for this project. We suggest that despite Mr. St. George's special interest in sheriff employees, that the row houses and the single family dwelling occupancy be broadened to include sheriff and fire department employees working in Solvang, City of Solvang and Solvang school employees. At one of the earlier meetings where he mentioned to the audience housing for sheriffs, one of We Watch's board members then later asked the sheriff on duty if he would be interested, and the answer was no. That's not all the sheriffs, but that's at least one sheriff making an opinion known. So those are my comments at this time for We Watch, and thank you for holding this meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have
I
any-
see that there's one more person that has their hand raised, if our IT can help. There's 10 participants, I only can see less
Yes,
than
this
10.
is Lansing Duncan. I would like to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been a Solvang resident now for 13 years and a Valley resident for 30 years. I was the former 3rd District Planning Commissioner for the county. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I think it's incredibly sad to see our community and this property treated with such disrespect. There's a remarkable opportunity on this site to create a project the community could all be proud of. But what's being presented appears to be an intentional insult. This site is at the gateway to the village, directly opposite the oldest structure in the entire valley, with a remarkable view of the San Ynez Mountains to the south. We should be looking at a silk purse, but what the applicant has purposely proposed is a sow's ear. If this is the best residential project that the developer can propose for this site, he needs to go back to school. Given his experience, it seems likely that rather than his best shot, this is a straw man, a stalking horse, something that's proposed to contrast with or conceal what he actually wants to do. And in that respect, I also was confused to see this mixed-use project included in the staff report when that's not before you at all. The site plan proposed is remarkably uncreative and appears to purposely concentrate the project's visual impacts along Mission Drive directly opposite Mission San Ynez. The monotonous 4-story facade without articulation makes no attempt to be compatible with the surrounding buildings. You might say it looks like an army barracks, but that would do a disservice to the army. But the effect is so bad that it could be interpreted as a significantly adverse impact to the setting of a listed historic structure. And what I'm talking about here is Mission San Ynez. In SB 3030, there are specific prohibitions about a significant adverse impact to listed historic structures. One of the few positive aspects to this proposal is the retention of the historic skid house. A more creative site plan would use a string of lower elevation elements that echoed this house, possibly duplexes or triplexes along the Mission Drive frontage. These buildings could wrap around a partially enclosed landscape area that buffered the project from the street. The project is definitely overbuilt with too many units on the site, and there's clearly inadequate parking for this number of units. And in that regard, it's not clear to me whether this reduction to 25% of what would actually be required for DR20 is actually necessary. You've already got a reduction to 118, and that's what you said, the staff report says, is due to the affordable housing. So we need some clarification there, whether you guys are actually obligated to reduce it once again to only 59 spaces or 62, as Mr. St. George claims he can make. It might be possible to create more parking if the storage building and token sheriff's housing were omitted and the Maple Street frontage actually used for residential units. This is part of the site plan which really makes no sense. You have two frontages here where potentially you could have structures on, and you've only got token structures up there now. You could have a third grouping of units that could occupy the center of the site, and that way you could divide up the parking spaces between these three groupings of structures. There are so many different ways a creative architect, and that's what you need here, you need an architect, you don't just need a contractor, could design this project. Clever design would allow buildings at the rear of the site to take advantage of the rising elevation and look over buildings closer to Mission Drive that need to be lower. They really should be no taller than 2 stories. This site has very poor access from Mission Drive, but potentially a right in and right out with a pork chop might reduce the impact of having all traffic use Maple. If all traffic uses Maple, this will only worsen an already bad situation at the Alisal and Mission intersection, which was just recently studied by the San Ynez Valley Traffic Plan and pointed out to be one of our big problem areas. There needs to be adequate parking, so Mission, Maple, and Pine are not adversely impacted with spillover. Spillover onto Mission will worsen congestion at one of the worst spots in Solvang in the valley. What is proposed is not architecture of any style. Dressing it up with Northern European detailing will not fix it. It is not, quote, high quality or, quote, authentic, as described in the community design element. And it certainly doesn't have a, quote, charming small town atmosphere, as described in the community design element of the general plan. This project needs to be compatible with Mission San Ynez, Solvang Veterans Memorial Building, the library complex, and adjoining residential areas. This is a critical gateway. It's identified in Exhibit 2 of the community design element of the general plan. What this commission probably should do is ask staff and the city council whether potentially a modification would be allowed that would allow Mediterranean architecture in this specific site, considering those adjoining important structures. This is a very important site. It deserves a quality project that serves our community. How often does a developer have a view shed like this to work with? It deserves the very best project possible, not an insult to the community. But maybe this developer is not up to it. So I would encourage your planning commission to ask for the very best you can get for this very important site. Do not roll over, whether it's SB 3030 or whatever else they're claiming. And I'm just amazed that your council and your staff there is not standing up for this community's values. They should be pursuing everything you need for this site, not rolling over and saying, oh, we can't do anything because of this state law. You won't get anything if you don't ask for it. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Duncan. Do we have any other comments?
If anybody else would like to speak, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
I'm unmuted. I'm gonna share my screen again.
This is the second time from the same person.
Okay, if you can be brief, please.
If you can take a screenshot of this. So we had Solvang 2.0, now we've got Solvang 2.0.1. It involves the actual property owned by Mr. St. George, and he stated he'll use SB 330 in his bid. It allows for no more than 5 opportunities for public comment, an increase in the number of units to provide more affordable housing, and a decrease in the number of parking spaces. He said he would expect the rooms to go for $500 to $600 a month. These units will be 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and such units are more in line with multifamily housing or dormitories than residential apartments. The sole project access on Maple will force already congested traffic pattern onto Pine. Parking on these streets is already difficult, not to mention a way to bypass downtown traffic lights. The speeds on these streets range anywhere from 30 to 50 miles an hour. Pine and Maple are arguably the highest traveled routes in Solvang, second only to Mission and Alisal, with no traffic relief in terms of quantity and speed mitigation. Making any turnoff of Pine Street onto Mission Drive is a risk. My residence fronts and backs up to the project and will have 4-story buildings looking into my backyard. In my experience, fence lines in front of and over from parking lots become easy trash receptacles, which are my backyard. A 2-story, 9,000 square foot storage facility with 8 by 10 units will line a parking lot. What do you do with stuff you don't want to store? Easy, you dump it right there. Is there a desire for sheriff's housing? Who would own these units? The city, Santa Barbara County, individuals? Will they always be occupied or sit empty because many already reside in the area and the surrounding community? What will be the impact of the proposed structures on the city's water and sewer systems?
Could I
Without a
interrupt
board
for
of
just a minute?
architectural review, a non-existent branding design community?
The chair
who
would
will
like to
oversee the
interrupt you
proposed
for a minute.
project?
Could-
I'm
Could
sorry?
you just summarize rather than read your whole letter?
Oh. Sorry, I was attempting to summarize. I encourage the members of Solvang's Planning Commission to make every effort to maintain the city plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, may I speak one more time?
Briefly, yes.
This last week, I watched a meeting in Santa Barbara of the Planning Commission there allow a project next to the Maverick in San Ynez. I just want to speak to what Lansing Duncan was saying in regards to not rolling over and not being pushed around by the state of California with their terrible legislation that they've passed in regards to some of the low-income housing that they're trying to put in. We need low-income housing. We absolutely need it. This project that they are doing next to the Maverick, it is going to be supportive housing. Supportive housing. These are veterans, elderly, homeless people, and developmentally disabled people that the Housing Authority is going to force to live next to the MAV because of a law that was passed, because the developer can do it. Not that he should, just because he can. They all said the same thing. Oh, my hands are tied, my hands are tied, my hands are tied. What are people going to say to their family members who are put in that facility? At times, 200 and 300 bikers in one day can park at the MAV. How would you like that at your home when you're trying to recover from alcoholism or drug addiction? Is that a good idea? This is the type of legislation that, and I mean, I just have to say, I know that there can be excellent low-income housing put into this area. Lansing is correct. This is a beautiful area. We could have wonderful little bungalows or cottages, or more than that, but you know, something that makes someone who is low income happy to come home. Somewhere that they can go to, that they're not stuck in a prison. Person upon person upon person. You know, I mean, we need to at some point fight these laws that cram this stuff down our throats. A better design can be had, absolutely, for our low income people. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll, unless there's anybody else, I don't see anybody, let's call it back to the council and the commission and for some discussion.
If I may just add a couple of points in response to your comments.
Sure.
First part is that this project will, once we have all the information, we send out a letter, 30 days, we will have a number of items that we will be identifying. The applicant is required to submit a full package.
I think Lori needs to turn her microphone on.
Yes, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you. So the process that we're going to undertake here is by September 2nd or September 6th, we will be responding back to the applicant based on our review from the fire department, public works, utilities. This project goes through a normal development review process. As Chip mentioned, health and safety are critical to this project and this project review. The project also undergoes environmental review. There is information in regards to historic resources on the property, and that will be included in the environmental review document. There will be a public document circulated under environmental review, and then we will start the planning commission and review process also. Technically, this project doesn't need to go to the city council because it's being designed as part of the current zoning ordinances. And so, if it goes to city council, it'll be by appeal. So those are the steps that we are going to be undertaking and working with the applicant and the community.
Okay, so as I understand it from my reading, the city has 30 days to respond along the lines.
When
that
it
you
was
said,
submitted, yes.
Including comments from tonight.
Mhm.
And once that letter goes to the developer, he's got 180 days, as I remember, up to 180 days to respond. And that response is in the form of a full application to move ahead. And at that point is when the environmental impact report will start to be generated. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And items that will be submitted will include things like the grading and drainage plan, so we can look at how water quality is going to be handled, and additional landscaping requirements. All of the questions that will come up from all of the different departments need to still be addressed. This is still a development project, and it'll be treated as such.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to start off? Scott, you mentioned you had some questions.
It's one of the biggest points for me. Actually, there's two of them. The first one is because we don't currently have a bar, but we are establishing some kind of the branding and design committee. Number one, when is that going to be established? Number two, does this particular project have to go in front of our new branding and design committee?
So to answer the first point is we are currently in a recruitment process for the branding and design committee. It closes on the 20th. I have enough applications to fill the spots. There's more than 5 applications at this point. So it will be scheduled either for the next council meeting or for the following council meeting for branding and design committee appointments.
And sorry.
Does this have to go to a branding and design committee? I think that will be a question of whether anything that the branding and design committee can comment on actually be binding in any way for this project. And of course, if we did send it to a branding and design committee, that would be another public Brown Act hearing, which would be one of the remaining 4. So we will have to work through that. Once again, this is a first SB 330 project that's come before us.
But that hearing with the branding and design committee is probably not going to happen before September 6th. Is that
Not
correct?
before September 6th, no.
So anything they may come up with is not going to be included in our response.
Not in our original
6th.
response.
Okay.
I have not had the opportunity to visit the surrounding streets, Maple and Pine, on the overnight hours. I suspect that, I guess I'd just like to get some feedback. I suspect that because these units are all 2-bedroom units, that we'll have an excess of cars. 59 units and 62 spaces. Where are the other cars going to be parked?
That question for me.
I guess I'm just making a statement. I need to. I'd like to have that information. We don't have meters. I don't know if there's red curbs. I don't know if there's overnight parking available on and around that area. Does anybody have any feedback?
I mean, we can, as a city, we can regulate our parking and try to mitigate whatever impacts could come out of the overspill from this type of project. We are currently working on a parking study that should be completed fairly shortly that can provide us with some additional tools and strategies on dealing with.
And some clarity on that one would be a big one. And I'm just curious, does anybody know how many parking spaces could if the 8,000 square foot storage building was not there, how many parking spaces would that hold?
Well, we looked at that, and I think it added another 11 or 12.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, it's not very many. And quite frankly, what you'll end up having is well, I guess we could put it, but because it's more than a duplex, we can't have any more than a 5% slope on the property for ADA access. So we'd have to end up there'd be a huge retaining wall. There's a 20-foot gradient difference between Maple and Mission. So we're kind of limited on how steep we can go. So initially, when you come in the driveway, it's going to be pretty steep, but the rest of the lot has to be 5% or less.
Is this an appropriate time to ask him questions? Yeah. If your sheriff-designated apartments don't get rented, will you rent them to other people, or will they run vacant?
Yeah, I've actually talked to the sheriff's department for a few years about this. There's a huge need for local sheriffs, especially here in the valley. And the reason I am so bent on sheriffs is just because it's very important in the community that these people be involved in their community. And that's how I feel about it. It's like I'm not an ex-sheriff or a cop or anything. My brother's not going to rent this place. I just think it's important, and I think it would benefit Solvang overall. I don't think there's going to be an issue having 3 sheriffs living in those places, especially being affordable. As far as the affordable units go, we can pretty much, if you've got what we're doing right now on Milpa Street in Santa Barbara, I took a project that was previously approved, 100% ready to pull the permit. We went back. In fact, it's going to council tomorrow. We're going back. We're going to be adding 16 affordable units to it. It's kind of weird for a developer to do that, but that's what we're doing. But we've actually designated those for teachers and for law enforcement. I know it sounds odd, but I'm just going to tell you my experiences growing up. If it wasn't for some of my teachers pulling me in after school and helping me with my homework, and my wrestling coach was a cop, and this guy kept me and a lot of the other guys on the wrestling team kept us in check, and those were the good days. I mean, having police that don't live inside the community or teachers that don't live inside your community, it becomes a detriment, at least in my mind, as a developer.
Thank you for that. One more question. Obviously, people people have noted that there is definitely a need for additional housing in the area, but you also heard a couple different times that there's a design element that they're worried about, concerned about, especially being in our little town. Are you open to listening and potentially changing or embracing some of what they have to say, or is this set in stone? Is this the party?
Scott, this is a pretty basic box. I don't appreciate Duncan's comments. That was the same, almost identical comments he had on my last project. I mean, it's almost like he keeps using the same one for project after project. I don't want to insult the guy, but I'm tired of hearing that. This is the beginning. This is all it is. It's a pretty basic box at this point. I would agree with that. I'm here for comments. You know, I want this to be nice as it can be at least. It is an affordable project. I mean, we can't make a whole bunch of duplexes and little single families. That'd be great. But the amount of money I ended up paying for this property, it wouldn't dictate it.
Thank you.
Just a couple of questions for perspective. Can you not enter the property from Mission? Does this entering from Mission create challenges? I assume that's not really a driveway, that's a sidewalk on Mission.
Yeah, David, what happened was initially with the hotel, because of the size of the project, everything's in scale. And so to be working with the state of California, I figured it would probably take take a tremendous amount of money and a whole bunch of improvements on Mission Street, on Mission Drive, I should say. with a low-income project like this, I'm very limited in the amount of off-site work I can do. The state of California is not generally easy to work with. I went back and actually, well, I should say I even contacted a planner that did the last project on Mission, and she was telling me about what a nightmare it was to get that access, so.
But where do like, if you're a fire truck, where do you come to access the property? Do you access it from Maple? Do you access it from Mission?
Well, it depends on the front building, and that's why, even when Duncan was talking about that, we deal with safety issues at the same time.
Yeah.
This building will be sprinkled, there's no question about it, but probably 95%, I'd probably say 99% of the fire department's calls are not having to do with a fire. And so it's just more of safety. So from Mission, I imagine they'd hit the front building. But if in fact there was a fire, they would probably come down the driveway, but once again, like I said, they're sprinklered. So it'd be highly unlikely.
And just for perspective space, there's apartments back here on Maple. What's the height of them? Are they 3 stories?
Yes, yeah, they're pretty tall. I couldn't give you the exact, but I think we scaled it out off of Google, and I think they were, I want to say 39, 38 feet in height, and they sit up higher.
Okay.
I think it was 38 or 39. We were just using Google.
And you're looking for 47?
Yeah. It's because of the parking. I mean, it really gets down to that, you know, trying to maximize the amount of parking. So that's why they are sitting in a row. But landscaping does a lot.
Sure. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
The only question I really have is why the radical shift in projects? I mean, you came over, you wanted to do the whole, I know the town got an uproar with the whole remodeling the Veterans Hall and all that stuff, but I mean, on your project, it looked like you scaled it down to something on your property. Why are you going from low income, now to low income housing from what looked like here, a hotel and a pool? And, you know, this is the entrance that, that people come into the city this way, and we're gonna have a monstrous housing apartment right there instead of, you know, I mean, that's downtown Solvang. Shouldn't it be for people walking around? And, I mean, why the radical shift from that to this, from this to that?
Justin, I've got pretty thick skin. I mean, I can tell you that. I've been a developer for a long time in the city of Santa Barbara, and that's not an easy place to be a developer. This is about as worse as it ever got. This is my wife. She wouldn't let me do it anymore. She just said, look, we're done. You're not going through this anymore. I mean, I was getting phone calls late at night, crazy things. I have never experienced anything like this, even in Santa Barbara. So we just kind of pulled back, and I bought this property originally to put housing on. When Ryan asked me to consider putting a hotel in, I got excited. I mean, I was looking at building a legacy project for myself, and I mean, just actually for my family as well. But it just seemed like I couldn't do anything right. And so I know how to build housing. That's what we do. That's my box. And so this is, I mean, I've already got a manager lined up for this as one of my employees. We're already talking to one of your local businesses here about taking, maybe even master leasing the whole building for that matter. So this isn't something I'll be proud of. I'll tell you that right now. But it's housing, it's affordable housing. Affordable housing typically you don't see a lot of beautiful projects in affordable housing unless the government's involved. Not the government.
Let's do that.
Looks like we have another hand up.
A lot of the comments that were made tonight, I agree with. I'm especially concerned about that first building and the entrance, you know, that's the entranceway to the city.
Mm-hmm.
And just based on your front elevation, it's not very attractive. And it doesn't fit in with the mission across the street or even meet the design guidelines in general plan that we have in place to at least try to reflect the rural character of the area. I mean, this is something you might see, you know, a tenement, it looks like a tenement district in New York with balconies. And there's, must be some way, and I'm not saying we don't need housing, we do. So I'm not opposed to putting in housing. But if there's some way that we can agree to make that, especially that first building, a little more attractive,
Sure.
it would go a long way to, you know, keeping the character of the city and keeping the residents happy as well.
Jack, what I can actually pitch the roof a little higher. It's a 4 and 12. We can go a little higher. I was trying to get the elevation down. Like I said, this is the first pass. You know, I can pitch the roof up to, you know, a typical what I would consider maybe an 8 and 12. We could add some dormers up onto it. You know, I'm open for that. I really am. I mean, let's maybe even undulate the building back and forth a couple is even. This is the.
You might look at what the previous owner of this, what he proposed. He had like a little courtyard just off of the Mission.
Sure enough, they're gonna look at this.
You know, it was nice, and then he had his condos, or I forget what they were behind that. But just something that is more attractive than this big, what looks to me from the drawings like a wall as you drive into the town. And I'm not asking you to design it right here, but
Yeah,
you'll have
sure.
plenty of time to think about that. But if you could, I'd like you to take into account the design guidelines and our general plan of, you know, how the city was planned and how we'd like to see it move ahead. And,
Absolutely.
and I think if you could do that, you wouldn't have these comments about eyesores and whatever.
And just to jump on Jack's last point, there's a, as you look at the city, obviously the different 2 or 3 tones buildings, and there's a special word for the actual lumber highlights that you'll see on many of the buildings in the downtown area. That may be something that you consider too.
Well, I'm sorry, where were those, Scott?
The lumber highlights, or there's a special word for them.
The crisscross is on the.
Oh, half timber.
Half timber.
Okay. Sure.
You'll see those on most of the majority of the buildings in the area. That may also bring something to the design that would be favorable for the folks.
I was
Sure.
going to say the same thing, at least make it look like Solvang with the Danish look, with the half timber, yeah.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, these are the comments I'm looking for right now.
And the other question, well, a couple of questions. One was brought up about the traffic. You know, people leaving here are either going to go down to Alisal or up to Pine. If they're going to the Chumash, they're going to be turning left off of Pine, which is very dangerous. So is there, and this is to our staff rather than you, is there going to be a traffic study required as part of this to show how that's going to be handled? And is Caltrans going to have to get involved at Pine and Mission?
There will be a traffic analysis done, and the issues of circulation, both the access off of Mission Drive into this project, if that's an option, as well as both intersections that would be mainly impacted at Pine and also at Alisal. They'll all be analyzed, because this is basically the last infill piece there, besides obviously the vets fit. And we need to look at everything that's going to be happening at the area, including fire protection, emergency services, and excess parking in the area.
And Zena, you mentioned parking study.
Mhm.
Is that going to be done in the next 30 days?
No, we're probably looking at about a couple of months to complete that.
Okay, and probably not, but I'll ask the question anyway. Has this scenario been factored into that parking study, at least as far as Maple and Pine are concerned? Because any overflow parking from here is going to go on there, and neither one of those roads are very wide.
Yeah, well, because we were delayed because of COVID-19 with the parking study, this actually comes in at a good time to where we can still include this in the scope of that analysis.
And so just following up on that with SB 33 or 330 or
330.
whatever it is. If the parking study says something contrary to what's in existence right now, we can't implement it for this project, is that correct?
I'm not sure I follow. Well,
I thought the SB 330 said that it's got to be ordinances and plans that were in place when the preliminary plan was submitted, which was August 6th. So is that going to apply to the results of the traffic study as well?
The traffic study is part of the environmental review based on the project that's submitted. So once we have all of the information, both engineering and technical, that'll be analyzed for things like noise, traffic, water and sewer calculations. All of that information is part of the environmental review and also part of the findings that you'll make for health and safety. So those are we're kind of bracketed by those two items, health and safety. And so the information that we will be gathering with this project will help us in those parameters.
Right, but even though that may be the case for this project, the city still has the powers to regulate its parking citywide. So there may be other strategies that the city can implement to ease whatever impacts are coming from this project by just implementing a different parking strategy.
I have one question regarding, as one of the residents brought up, and I always think about this as well, is we have this impending issue with the wastewater treatment plant needing renovation. So, and you're bringing in 2.5 baths per unit. That's a lot of toilets and a lot of flushing water. So what have we thought about that at all? And what's the limitation of our existing infrastructure?
We have not done that analysis. So once again, as Lori said, this will have to go through a normal development project review, and water and wastewater are part of that review.
Similar to the ADUs, the
Right.
same question I asked there is, how would this fit into the plan or impact any future plans for growth in the city as far, because we've got limited water.
Right. Well, in case of this project, it's a project with a more defined timeline than the ADUs. So we would have to address water and wastewater within the time frame of this project.
And then I have a question about the sheriff's units. And it's one of the people who spoke mentioned, could we make these available to more than just the sheriffs? You know, the fire, for example, they could use housing as well. And also on the units, are they for active duty personnel only, or can a retired sheriff move in there and retire there?
Jack, here's the difference between a firefighter and a police officer in law enforcement. A firefighter is usually with a group of people during their entire shift, whereas a law enforcement officer is usually riding individual. Firefighters tend to be heroes, whereas you've looked what's happened in the last few months at law enforcement. The stresses and the strains that are put on police officers that show up in a community where they don't live, where they really don't know the people. That's why, for me, sheriff's housing, law enforcement housing is much more important than it would be for firefighters. Firefighters get to sleep with a whole bunch of guys, a bunch of girls. There's a lot of camaraderie there. But if you don't live in a community and you finish your shift and you have to drive an hour home, you know, there's no opportunity. It's like, you know, hey, Jack, let's go have a beer real quick. No, you got to get home. Whereas firefighters don't have that. It's like, hey, you know, they've got that camaraderie. And I think law enforcement needs that. I mean, I really do. So living in a community.
I understand what you're saying, and following up on that a little bit, in your conversations with the sheriff, has he given, and since we only have, what, 1 or 2 deputies here?
7 total in the valley from the last time.
Yeah, but I meant in the city, there's 7 in the city?
In the area.
In the valley, yeah. Would the sheriff require his people that are assigned to Solvang to live in that housing?
Oh, this is an agreement that isn't even, this is my own personal agreement with the sheriff's department. This isn't part of the low-income housing. The low-income housing, like I said, we can say, we can offer it to the teachers if we want to make it to the teachers, or maybe even the librarians, or as one woman said, you know, if there's something that community, I as the landlord can kind of do, as long as there's not any sort of discrimination aspect to it, we can say, okay, you guys will have first choice. And so we can offer this to the school district and say, hey, look, if you guys want to lease these places, they're yours to lease. And if they don't, then it kind of goes out to bid in a sense. The sheriff's department, we're just going to be supplying these houses. They're going to be a lower income. They're not going to be regulated, or because the sheriff would make too much money to actually qualify even for a medium high. But it's not, it's moreover, you want them in the community. And you may only have 7 or 8 active in the whole San Ynez Valley, but if you've got a guy that's going back and forth, I should say, I don't know how far I don't know much about Guadalupe, honestly, but I'm just going to use that as an example. That was bad, sorry. But it's, the bottom line is they want to live here, and I know that for a fact because I asked them. But that would be a personal contract that I had with them, as that the city wouldn't have to worry about that.
The city wouldn't be involved in that?
No, this is just something, this is a personal thing.
Okay, well, those are my concerns. The big one is the design, especially of that first building in the entrance to the city. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at our general plan and our design elements and what have you. What you show here does not fit that at all.
I'll take notes. I'll rewatch this, and they'll have notes for me too. But I can add the half timber. We could put some dormers up. I mean, it's not a problem.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay.
Thank you very much,
you.
and we
All right.
will provide each of you a copy of the letter that we send out, so you know how we've responded to the first review of this project. Okay.
Okay, and do you have any other comments to make?
Yes, I do have one comment. The agenda that, or the schedule that I presented to you back 2 months ago in regards to the Planning Commission meetings had the October meeting as a break. I'm wondering if we could go ahead and hold that meeting. We do have a number of projects that are ripening for the Planning Commission. And so if you could look at your calendars and let me know if the August, I think it's August 8th meeting. October, sorry, pardon me.
First Monday in
Yeah.
October.
In October, if that's available for you.
Okay. So I think,
Okay.
I haven't looked at my calendar,
Yeah,
but.
just email
I
me
suspect
and
I
let me
can
know.
Probably make it
Okay,
available.
thank you.
And it would probably make sense to do that with so many things going on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Linda.